This is Kuala Lumpur, one of the most expensive cities to live in Malaysia, where the price of an average house is 785,000 ringgit Malaysia. When it's so expensive to own a house, we all start wondering, is it really worth it to buy a home for yourself? Or is it better to just rent one? Our sponsor for this video, MahSing, offer you the opportunity to own your dream home with their 3 doses of home booster via their MahSing NOW campaign. With an easy loan approval process with Maybank House Key and zero payment, that's zero down payment needed, zero payment during construction, and zero legal fees on SPA and loan. On top of that, you get to enjoy huge savings up to 50% off your monthly payments, saving on MOT and saving with their free furniture as well. Walao, where to find, right? Hey, you vaccinated already or not? If yes, you get extra cash incentives some more. So don't settle for just 2 shots. Enjoy their 3 doses of home booster now. Check out the link below to find out more. Campaign ends by 30th of September. Terms and conditions apply. The average house price in Malaysia have grown significantly over the years, from slightly above 200,000 in 2010 to 425,000 in 2018. That's more than double over the past 10 years. So it's no surprise that many Malaysians wonder if they don't buy a property soon, they will miss out big time because the price will just go higher and higher in the future. You probably also have heard people telling you before that renting a property is like throwing your money away. You are helping the landlord to pay for the property, stuff like that. So first thing, is renting really a waste of money? Well, I used to think that, but now I kind of disagree because unless you have the privilege of living with your parents, you will need a roof over your head. So in that case, renting is not really a waste of your money. You are getting something back in return, which is a space to live in. It's just that there's no future value after you stop renting. In fact, if you think about it, you are actually still renting even after buying a property. The difference is you are renting money from the bank to buy a property and you happen to live in that property. Then hopefully one day the property will increase in value over a period of time and you make some profit out of it. Now, if you stop paying, you will still be chased out of the property. But instead of a landlord coming after you, this time it's going to be the bank. And trust me, it is worse than a landlord.
I declare bankruptcy!
So once you commit to a property, you have to make sure that you have a stable cash flow that can continuously pay for the installment. If you are uncertain that you can service the loan for the next 30 years, just don't.
If you're doing it, stop it.
The point is, buying a property is a big decision. It is almost like a marriage.
Mr. Peter, do you think this 500,000 is a lawful mortgage to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or for worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to continuously pay for the installment until death do you part, or fully settle the loan?
I do. Once you're committed, your life will change. You will need to think twice before quitting your job or taking any new financial risk. If you're renting and you lose your job, it is much easier to just move to a cheaper property without much legal implication. Alright, I'm making property ownership sound a little bit scary, but that's not the point. The point is, you need to think seriously before committing to buying a property. It can be the best decision in your life, but it can also be the worst if you're doing it wrong. So, which is better? Renting or buying? Well, it's all about considering the opportunity cost. Weigh out the pros and cons of each option and decide which is most suitable for yourself. To understand this fully though, we have to start by looking at the cost of each option. You have probably heard some people telling you, if you're gonna pay 2,000 ringgit a month to rent a house, might as well pay 2,000 ringgit in installment. At least you own the home at the end of the day. First thing first, for 2,000 ringgit a month, can you get the same house? And what about the down payment, the legal fees and the stamp duty and so on? Those are the added costs on top of your mortgage installment. So if you want to compare between buying and renting, we have to compare apples to apples. Now, let's use an example of 2 friends. Both have the same net worth, but one decide to buy, another decide to rent. Buyer Brian bought a house in Puchong for 600,000 ringgit. Assuming he managed to get 90% financing, he will need to fork out 60,000 as a down payment and another 30,000 for legal fees and stamp duty. So his total upfront cost is around 90,000. This is assuming he won't do any renovation, and we will exclude the cost for furniture as well. Then from that day onwards, Brian will need to make a loan repayment every month. Inclusive of interest, it will come up to around 2,600 ringgit per month for the next 30 years. So the total amount he would have paid over the next 30 years will be around 1 million ringgit. This also includes the upfront cost of 90,000 that he paid at the start. Assuming the property will increase in price in future at the rate of around 5% per annum, then the property will have a value of 2.6 million 30 years later. If he were to sell the house by then, he will have a profit of 1.6 million ringgit. Again, we are not taking into account of maintenance, renovation, and so on, which will eat into the profits. What about Rental-Roni? Let's say he managed to rent a decent unit right next to Brian at the price of 1,500 ringgit a month. His upfront cost, 2 months of deposit, half a month of utility, and the first month of rental upfront, and also the tenancy agreement. That should come out to around 5,250 ringgit. However, if Ronnie used a platform such as Speed Home, the upfront cost is just the first month's rental. This is significantly less upfront cost compared to buying a property like Brian. Moving on, we assume Ronnie's landlord will increase his rental 2% every year. He would have paid 730,000 in rent to his landlord over the period of 30 years. By then, he could be thinking, damn, should I have just bought the property? Well, this depends, because let's not forget, Ronnie actually saved up 90,000 because he did not need to pay any down payment, any upfront costs like buyer Brian. So assuming Ronnie is a wise investor, he will take this 90,000 and invest it. Then in this case, there is 3 scenarios. The first scenario, he makes a great return from his investment. Assuming he made 15% return a year for the next 30 years. In this case, Ronnie will have 5.9 million by then, which is fantastic. Now he can buy a house with cash, and also he will have a comfortable surplus even after buying the house with cash. The second scenario, he made an average return, assuming around 10% a year for the next 30 years. In this case, he will have 1.57 million. Well, it's good enough to pay for the down payment for the house if he wishes to, but he also has the option to buy another property elsewhere that maybe fits his budget better. The third scenario, he didn't do very well with his investment. Let's say he only got around 5% return per annum for the next 30 years. Now, he will only have 389,000 after 30 years. Well, although he has enough to pay for the down payment for the house by then, but it may not be the wisest choice at that age, since he will need to spend most of his 389,000 as an upfront payment in the form of down payment and legal fees and stamp duty. Well, maybe it's better off that he actually look for a cheaper property elsewhere that can fit his budget better. Let me introduce you to another scenario. Say Ronnie is not very smart. He did not even invest the 90,000. Instead, he chose to spend it all away. They say YOLO, right? YOLO! In that case, he may have gained some memorable experience, but he will have no money and no house after 30 years. As you can see by now, the extra money that Ronnie saved up from not paying any upfront down payment or legal fees can do wonders for his financial future. If his investment turned out to have good return, renting is probably the best decision for him. Since he has saved up on the upfront fee, he has a good amount of capital to start investing, and 30 years down the road, he can easily buy a property with cash and still have comfortable amount of surplus. However, if his investment is not performing, he will end up with less money, and the same house now will cost him around 2.6 million. In the meantime, Brian, who bought a house, may not have the most profitable return for his money, but he's kind of secured with a house. If he sells it, he can make a decent profit. On the other hand, he has other options such as renting it out in future to generate passive income or refinancing it to get some cash. So although it may not have the best return if you compare to Ronnie's potential 15% return a year, but owning a house, it's kind of like a more secured path, right? As we have mentioned, there's a chance that Ronnie may not be a very good investor and end up getting lousy returns, right? And that will really affect his financial future. And that will not turn out to be so well for him. So having the skills to invest well is very important. So if you'd like to learn more on how to invest in the stock market, we are organizing a stock investing bootcamp this year. So do check it out in the link below. At the end of the day, there are many variables that can change the outcome for both Brian and Ronnie. Here, we only touch on the financial part. What about the emotional part? Let's face it, owning a home is not just about a financial thing, right? It is also a very emotional thing. You see, Brian may feel more stable since he can live in a house according to his own term. He can renovate the place to his liking, he can buy certain furnitures, he can make upgrades to the house as he pleases. Since he will never need to move out unless he can't make his mortgage payment, or maybe his wife chase him out. Like what many say, right? At the end of the day, he still got a house. On the other hand, for Ronnie, he will have to live in the house according to his landlord's terms. If they would like to move in or sell the house, they can chase him off in a short notice. He can't make significant upgrades to the house because he don't own the place. Even when it comes to buying furniture, it could be a challenge because he will need to consider when his landlord will decide to chase him out. He also needs to be really cautious with his investment, because if he doesn't make a good investment and lose his money, he may end up with no money and no house at the end of the day. But on the other hand, Brian, who bought a house, actually now has a huge commitment. He can't simply quit his job or take any financial risks as he please. He needs to make sure he can service the mortgage payment, and financial security now becomes his top priority. However, for Ronnie, he has much more financial flexibility. He can quit his job if he doesn't like it, or he can start a business of his own, or take that money that he has saved up and invest it elsewhere. With this flexibility, he can take more financial risks, and hopefully it will bring him huge rewards in the future. Maybe he'll end up a multi-millionaire, then owning a house is no more a problem. The point is, there are pros and cons to each of these decisions. For myself, I find my opinion to buying and renting change at different stages of my life. When I was single, I never thought of owning my home. I do buy properties, but what I would do is to rent it out to generate income. I see property as an investment, and buying a home seems like a foolish choice for me financially. Even after I got married, I would still prefer to rent a house rather than buying one. And if I were to buy one, I would prefer a condominium since it has more facilities, right? But once I got my kid and I saw them growing up, I started to prefer owning a landed property with more space so that my kids can play. Whether buying is better or renting is better, it really depends on when you ask me that question. So some people ask me, did I regret not buying a landed property many years ago when it was much cheaper? After some long thoughts about it, honestly, I don't, because if I did, I would not have the risk appetite to start my own business. But having said that, there are also days that I wonder, if only. But what I will do is I will just brush it away and tell myself to look forward and make the best with what I have and strive harder to make the best of my decisions. At the end of the day, no one can really guarantee which is a better choice, because the truth is there are so many variables, and the best choice is the one that you have thought through and you know clearly why you made that decision. Then make the best of it. And if you get it wrong, it's okay. Don't be too hard on yourself. If there's something you can learn from it, it is not a failure. Tell us in the comment which is a better choice for you, buying or renting.